Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great webinar put together by the team at Reuters Events for the insurance space. I am your host today. I'm Brian Felchuk. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of the book series, The Future of Insurance from Disruption to Evolution. And we are talking about how we cater for tomorrow's customers today. I think we've all been living in this right now moment of everything we had to get out the door so we could serve customers as lockdowns hit and as their expectations really flew through the roof. The question is, what's the next wave of expectations and how do we start doing that today? So we're ahead of the curve. So we're not, lagging and scrambling, but also we can be seen differently from how the industry maybe has been thought of traditionally. So really great opportunity for the insurance industry, given a lot of the things that we've all put in place in the past couple of years, especially. And I have a great panel with some real firsthand living it kind of experience across a variety of different situations, large customer bases, and seeing across a number of carriers as well. So we will have a really rich conversation for you today. I am joined by Yasmin Green, who's from Nationwide Insurance, VP of Enterprise Customer Solutions and Enablement for Nationwide. We have Dan Perry, who's a Senior Product Owner for Cognitive Experience and Digital Messaging at Liberty Mutual, and Bijan Mehta, who is the Global Head of Financial Services for Twilio. And if you maybe recognize Twilio or you're not sure, if you've texted with a company, there's a good chance you are using Twilio's platform. So they're sort of empowering so much of the digital communication that is going on in the B2C, B2B, but commercial usage space. So I'm excited to have Bijan to your perspective across this whole industry and maybe some insights from outside of insurance so we can take some knowledge from our peers in banking and other parts of the financial world. So great to have everybody here today. For all of you in the audience, you have a task as well, and that's Q&A. These webinars are good, but not great if we don't get your points that you want us talking about. So the key is listen in during the opening comments. What questions are on your mind, pop them right into the Q&A. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we will spend our time, the bulk of the time, really focusing on the things you want to hear about. So ask your questions. You don't have to wait till we get to the Q&A section. Pop them in at any moment. I just ask you put them in the Q&A section. You can see it right down at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. And that's what will make this such a valuable conversation, because we will talk about the things you directly want to know about. With that, Dan, I'm going to turn to you first and ask for some thoughts about this transition we have of thinking ahead for a change instead of just reacting to all the things that are suddenly thrown at us. And from Liberty's perspective, how is Liberty Mutual kind of navigating this, and anything you have to share to kick things off?
Yeah, happy to. Really happy to be here and excited to contribute to the conversation, as well as learn from some others as well. So yeah, I'd say looking back over the past few years, there's no shortage of emphasis on re-examining, the digital experience and globally our digital strategies, likely challenging where there's a need for human touch and in many ways resetting expectations. But beyond that, I think there's some complementary themes and learnings that I've experienced coming out of it that will, probably be worth reflection and might prove to be good fodder for today's conversation. The first of which is that for me, the pandemic added credence to the agile transformation that I've been a part of over the past decade, as I'm sure many of you have as well, if not over the last 5 years. The pandemic highlighted the need to nurture that continuous feedback loop between your customer experience and your digital capabilities and your strategic goals. Ultimately, agile is a good framework for keeping a pulse on the customer experience and how that ladders back to your business goals. And it's that rapid iterative feedback loop that's critical to adapting in a changing world. And depending on your serverless cloud native footprint, among other things, an agile mindset can allow you to evolve in days and weeks as opposed to years and decades. So for me, it really reinforced that we're on the right path, have been. And I think we'll kind of see a doubling down in terms of that agile mindset and philosophy moving forward, and maybe an evolution in agile in and of itself, so that we continue to work towards nimble, iterative processes where we're being reactive to a feedback of products that we put in market that same day. Beyond that, I'd say there's certainly an emphasis on focusing not just on customers, but also employees. Your customer-facing frontline staff, they need to be ready to embrace new digital assets and champion them with your customer base. And moreover, there's many digital tools that can augment and streamline their existing processes and tasks to eliminate noise, reduce repetition, whatever it might be. So essentially, you can free them up to have more meaningful engagements and otherwise be critical thinkers. And ultimately, happy employees translates to happy customers. A fun anecdote from my world recently is that we put a predictive model in front of incoming text messages. So prior to the predictive model, a text message would come in, and our representatives would type a reply, or they'd choose from a template barn, a template repository of pre-written responses that were slightly dynamic. They could click the template response, send the message on its way. What the predictive model did is it suggested the appropriate template to use based on the customer's intent with their incoming SMS message. And we then took it a step further to build a feedback loop so that the representative selection, so the confirmation or declination of the model's recommendation for the template to use was fed back into that model ecosystem, so you could improve the efficacy of that model over time. So it was a really interesting, almost like batch generative chatbot type approach to partnering with our employees to improve their overall experience. And they loved it. And ultimately, it's also improved the efficiency of the SMS channel for us overall. So it was not just a great win for our employees, but then that translates to a great win, for our customers as well. But beyond just, focusing on your customer-facing employees, I say focus on all employees. Like, I love to feel empowered as an owner of applications to take risks and learn fast. That fosters a culture of innovation and also, allows us to be nimbler and more adaptable moving forward, which is undoubtedly critical. And then I'd probably sum it up with the last kind of big overarching theme for me coming out of the pandemic, or hopefully soon coming out of the pandemic, I suppose, is the need to use customer data advantageously. Doing so allows you to create increased personalization and increased flexibility, both of which are core tenets to a strong digital experience. And to pull maybe an example from our virtual agent space, which is our telephony chatbots, our telephone chatbots. When a customer reaches out, we use customer data advantageously right at the start. So we'll predict why they've reached out. So are you calling about your open auto claim, or are you calling about your pending payment? And that small degree of personalization actually increases the digital throughput that we see, or increases our self-service adoption, because we've instilled confidence with our customers that we know who they are, we know why they've reached out, and we're here to help. And it's doing so in a channel that is traditionally non-digital, but you're able to get that engagement right from the start if you're able to use your customer data advantageously to personalize it just to a small degree. And then building off of that virtual agent example for flexibility as well, we integrated SMS with our virtual agents. So when a customer calls in, they can elect to receive a text message to do really a variety of things. They could receive a link to go to an e-service webpage or the app, by way of example, which no shortage of customers elect to do. Or they could receive a payload of information, right? Like your claims adjuster is ABC. Or you can switch from a telephone call to a two-way asynchronous text conversation. And you can take all of that a step further by kind of eventing and saving that customer data along that journey. What is their preference? What is their intent? And you can use that 2 minutes, 2 days, or 2 years down the road. But ultimately, it's offering that degree of flexibility that has been appreciated by our customer base and widely adopted. Anyway, I'll wait to ramble on and on until we get to some of the other folks as well. But no shortage of anecdotes and learnings coming out of the pandemic, and excited to see where we take the conversation.
No, that's great, Dan. And there's clearly a few key themes that I think all of us can consider. Your holistic employee view. It's not just the frontline folks. It's the whole company. It's everyone, because we all ultimately come together for that customer service. You use that word confidence. that I think is really critical. It's not just about getting the service call closed faster or the request taken care of, the claim closed faster. Yes, that's all good stuff. But through that process, are we also raising the confidence level that our customers have or our employees have in the tools and the services that we're providing to them? So sort of thinking with that mindset is how can we make this experience help them trust us and trust what we're doing for them. So I think that's a great point to pull forward. Thank you for that. Yasmin, I saw you nodding a bunch of times. So I'm guessing you're going to be in agreement with a lot of this, but I'd love some thoughts from your perspective nationwide. What are you seeing and how are you thinking about this?
Yeah, you're right, Brian. I'm sitting here in the amen corner here, and I really love some of the comments that were shared. And from my perspective, I am coming from a place where I am trying to strengthen the emotional and behavioral loyalty of our customers and accelerating the customer experience. I'm streamlining processes, but I'm also doing it not only from a customer perspective, but also from an associate perspective, as well as the intermediary. And Dan is right on point. When we think about the intermediaries and the associates, we look at it from a culture perspective. It really starts with the culture. You know what they say about culture and strategy? And it starts with culture. And I'll tell you some great things that we have done is really understanding, and the pandemic just fast forwarded this for us, is creating spaces for our associates that are collaborative and flexible. So when the pandemic came, we already had, we were ready to make changes within our spaces within the company. So then when the pandemic came, we made those changes. So when associates come into the office, whether they're work from home or in a hybrid situation, they have these wonderful spaces that they can sit in. They have we call them a nest or room, separate locations. So we have sped up those processes and built those where associates can come in and feel comfortable, either whether they're working from home or a hybrid or have their own space here. So thinking from an associate perspective, we've included all of that into the pandemic or the endemic, thinking about what does customer experience look like? How do we look at it from an associate, intermediary, and customer perspective? And in my space, while I'm looking to improve and increase the emotional support and connection with our customers, what I found is, we're always looking to look at the behaviors of our customers. We found there's really like 5 behavioral things that have happened with our customers in moving in the pandemic. One is that customers have a willingness to experiment. And I think Dan said it earlier in reference to how they made change and do things moving forward. Think about the QR codes. We remember QR codes, but they really fast forward when it came to the pandemic. And digital and self-service, we saw a lot of those fast forward. A reliance on personal devices, streamlining, just like Dan said, streamlining digital and physical interactions, and a savvier navigation of information. And we heard Dan talk about using the information that comes in and harnessing the brand for personal well-being. And with Nationwide, we have the P&C, the insurance, and the financial. We've been able to take advantage of the diversity of products during the pandemic. So I would say for me, just to wrap it all up, the pandemic, while it was a surprise in reference to the things we had to do, we were already in process to do this. When we had to go and work from home, our IT was up and ready for the associates to help them. We fast forwarded from a culture perspective to help them when they came in. From a pandemic perspective. And then for our customers, able to provide them moving forward, to Dan's point, being nimble and quick with some of the services and the products and offerings that we had for the customers during that time period. So really listening to the customers and listening to associates and the intermediaries, I would say that is the key, keeping your finger on the pulse.
I love that. And when you said spaces, I was like, do you mean physical spaces? Do you mean, because I know at the same time, Nationwide also made a decision on your office footprint in the pandemic, and put a lot of tools in people's hands, associates' hands, to navigate the ways that everyone's going to be working going forward. How have you been managing the associates, both retrospectively, but as you think ahead to the way that Nationwide will work and will serve customers and serve your employees?
We realized that 50% of our associates came back. So that means 50% have a different workspace.
Yeah.
They are either 100% work from home, 70, 80, or 90% work from home. And then periodically, some do come into the office. We realized early on that when they come into the office, they're going to have a place to sit. And it may look different, and it does look different than it does in the past. And I'll tell you, it's some new wave stuff. I actually like it. There's a space you can go. We have bistro tables. You can have a little conference, sitting. You maybe think that you're sitting on a conference couch or couch at your home having a conference. If you need to go into a small booth room, a soundproof room, to
Yeah.
have a collaboration session or a teleconference, you can come in for that. I mean, just to see it, and there's actually a link to it it was on one of the news stations here. There's a link, and I'll provide it to you later, Brian, if you want to share. But it's a really nice space. And I'll tell you, sometimes, even though I have an office here, I go down to the nest myself because it's kind of neat. It's
Yeah.
really a neat place. And I think it helps with the culture of the company and culture with our associates to let them know we thought about you. And we
Yeah.
thought about you early on, and we built it for you.
Yeah.
So that now when you come in, you have this really nice space to sit. And it takes advantage of what happened in the pandemic and takes advantage of and lets associates know we not only heard you, but we anticipated what you needed and we built it.
I think it makes a really strong point. We can't talk about the future of customers and customer experience without talking about the future of work and the associate
Yes.
experience. So
Yes.
that's a good point. And I am curious to see the nest. So I would love to get that. Bijan, I want to turn to you to wrap things up. Yes, your perspective from Twilio, but also kind of cheating because you get to see across so many different companies and so many different solution providers. I imagine you have a really rich view of what lots of different people are looking at as they sort of prepare for where that bar is moving to.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brian. And I'm definitely encouraged by what Dan and Jasmine kind of highlighted, because it does speak to what I'm hearing across not just insurance carriers, whether they're in P&C or life and annuity, but even outside insurance, whether it's banking or wealth management. We're, as a company, we're focused on, accelerating customer engagement. And we do that primarily through our APIs. What we've recently done as a company is we've expanded into SaaS capabilities. But the central focus of the company continues to be how are organizations engaging with their broad variety of constituents. And that starts, again, with the employee, right? So how are corporates dealing with their employees, which has taken on a whole new resonance given the pandemic and the work from home situation and the hybrid, scenario that most organizations are going to be carrying forward. But it obviously extends to the customer. And when I say customer, I mean the existing customer, but then also the customer that they plan to go after, right? Who are they approaching next, right? It could be prospects, it could be customers that they may appeal to by expanding their business set. And so, for us, we put out an annual state of customer engagement report. And the next report, I believe, is coming out tomorrow. But from the most recent report, we do a survey of about 2,500 executives, again, across a variety of industries. And one of the most interesting statistics was that 98% said that the state of digital transformation has accelerated on average 6 years in the last 2, meaning the pace with which they are doubling down and focusing their efforts around new products, product development. It could be, incorporating better agile, focusing on time to market has dramatically increased. And we like to say at Twilio, great experiences are built, they're not bought, right? So, the time when you would go to a software company and you would simply, say, look, it's got 80% of what I need, and I'll craft the balance of the 20%, has actually kind of flipped on its head, where customers are now looking at our APIs to then embed across their applications and embed it through portals, through mobile apps, to create a much more holistic engagement and ultimately meeting their customers where they choose to be met. It could be text messaging, it could be chat bots, it could be a phone call, it could be an email. At Twilio, we kind of power APIs across all of those channels, right? That's kind of what people tend to know us for. The second thing people tend to know us for is our security and compliance capabilities. Things like two-factor authentication, one-time passwords, which again, that business is accelerated because so much of our products and services are moving into a mobile offering. The third thing people tend to know Twilio for is what I refer to as light workflow automation. It could be, sending out a survey to your customer, right? If you're going to send 30,000 surveys out, you need a robust infrastructure to do that. It could be to set up appointment reminders, right? Because again, now the ability to meet face-to-face is more constrained. And so you need to, have appointments set up. And so we power a lot of that. The fourth area that people tend to know Twilio for is around customer service. So think of everything from an IVR, right? Press 1 for this and 2 for that, to a chatbot, to a contact center. And we power those experiences. And the last area that people tend to know Twilio for, it's fairly recent, but it's customer data platform. It's our acquisition of Segment that we concluded 2 years ago, which is now allowing us to help organizations like Dan's and Jasmine's put together a 360-degree view of the customer, which can then help drive the digital engagement over whichever channel that customer chooses to be engaged with. So now we feel like we have that full stack. But coming back to where you started the conversation off with me in terms of what are some of the other industries doing, wealth management has taken digital again to a new level because advisors were prevented from meeting with customers for a good long period of time. And so they were employing things like video APIs, right? They're employing things like, texting from your phone, but to do it in a way that you're using your own device, but it's connected to the firm's compliance system so that it can be monitored for compliance purposes. So, we're seeing insurance carriers now asking for those capabilities because, many insurance companies are actually now looking at diversifying their business beyond just that insurance policy and are looking at a broader understanding and access to their customers' financial picture. So, we're providing a variety of these tools. COVID, for as painful as it's been within society, has been a tailwind for the business. And we're very fortunate to be working with the types of customers that we're working with and helping them realize the potential of their business.
6-year acceleration. I think we all felt that, but that's a spot on point. And Bijan, you talked about so many different ways that people are connecting different modalities, but also different tools to get to those modalities. And I think that's critical is that level of flexibility. We have some great questions that have already come in that I definitely want to hit. Wonderful. And that's a friendly reminder to everyone who's watching, ask your questions because we are going to talk about them. Here comes another one. I want to start with this one, and it's about adoption rates. So we talk about all the new tools that came out. Yasmin, I'm going to start with you, but you listed those 5 behavioral changes in that first one. Customers are willing to experiment and they're trying these tools. What have you seen happen to adoption of some of these tools? Because not all of them came out post-lockdowns. A lot of these things were already available and people maybe weren't using them as much. What have you seen for adoption? And the second part of the question, I think, is a great one for us to talk about, honestly, is what challenges do we still have? are they jumping on board with everything, or are there some areas where, it's still not there yet? And maybe that means it's the wrong tool, or it's too soon for it, or something else, so the wins and how that's looked, but also maybe some of the challenges we've seen.
Well, that's a great question. And I love that you put the two together. So what we've seen in reference to adoption, I think Bijan mentioned it, that 6-year acceleration. We saw the 6-year acceleration with customers. We moved that fast because customers wanted to move that fast. And the pandemic basically forced us into that space. We saw adoption rates. We are seeing adoption rates increase from a digital perspective, which is a good thing. Same thing as self-service. It's increasing. However, there's still some, when you look at the segmentation of your customers, there's still customers who still want to contact you and speak with you, whether it's from a financial perspective or even a claim perspective. And we have to make sure that those channels are available. So I think we talk about, it's not one size fits all. It's one size fits the ones that want to go through that channel. And you have to understand which want digital, which want, to be able to speak with someone, and you have to have that available, whether it's a texting. So we have increased in all of those different channels, and we have seen the adoption rates increase across the entire enterprise, on the financial side as well as on the P&C side. And you have to say that's a good thing, because customers are willing to self-serve, they're willing to experiment and find these tools themselves. And so you say the challenges. So let's talk about the challenges a little bit. I would say the challenges would be that it's moving fast. The challenge is this 6-year, and the 6-year is turning the 10-year, and you have to keep thinking about what's on the horizon. So past the QR code, what's the next thing? And stay ahead of what the customers are looking for. So that's the challenge, is always stay, not 2 steps, but 3, 4, 5, 6 steps ahead of the customer to make sure that you're ready, and always have that contingency plan in place when something happens. I think, I hope that answers your question, but that's what I'm seeing in the space from a digital perspective. We are seeing an adoption in the digital.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think there's a couple of challenges you hit. And one is just presuming that it's, put the one tool out and that solves all the needs. It's quite different. And maybe it's the same customer, 2 different situations, or 2 different points in that same situation where their needs change. You actually set up the next question I'm going to get to, but we're not going to hit that yet. But thank you for that. Dan, over to you. What are some of the big wins that you've seen from an adoption standpoint? But then where are some of the places where maybe it's not quite what you expected, or you need to pivot on the solution a bit?
Yeah, similar to Yasmin, I think we've seen adoption lift across the variety of our digital tools, as the appetite for digital utilization is obviously forefront with COVID, and also incentivized with COVID as well. A good example is with our texting platform. You could look at utilization overall within financial services. I think Forrester put out an article on this maybe last year. It was pretty interesting, but you see a kind of linear trend in SMS utilization within financial services, and then an exponential increase as soon as COVID hits. Yeah. And that exact trend is mirrored in what we see with SMS utilization for us. Obviously not without investment in that as a self-service modality, but nonetheless, exponential utilization and increase in appetite to use that for claims adjudication or for just general servicing of questions. And we've seen lift in addition with our virtual agent chatbots, our SMS chatbots, and our overall kind of digital experiences. But for us, it's like, for the challenge, I think it's highlighted where we need to build better connectivity across formerly kind of disparate parts of the organization. And I think, Bijan hit API optimization and really having APIs kind of front and center in what Twilio offers. I think the last few years have really highlighted the importance that any larger organization, particularly one not born in the cloud, needs to partake on to invest in an API first strategy. In many ways, your organizational structure can mirror your technology infrastructure, and the experiences you create should not be a product of your organizational structure. It should be a product of the customer journey and what best serves the customer. And so we've been on a path to kind of break down those walls, right? So whether or not it's by channel, if it's SMS, text, the app, your digital assets, how can you break down those walls and build APIs so that the data and experiences that are created in each one of those channels doesn't just stay in those particular domains, but it's surfaced and discoverable across all those channels for everyone to use. And you can even take it a step higher too, right? Like bifurcating into billing and payments, or claims, servicing, sales, whatever it is. Those are formerly like different domains. They could have sat on different floors back in the pre-pandemic world. And they would kind of curate and manage their own data respective to their domains. And for me, a good thought exercise has been, what data do I need to create an exceptional customer experience for the applications and experiences I own? And almost always the answer is the data is elsewhere in the organization. It just needs to be discoverable and accessible to me and my team so that we can make that experience that much more powerful. So that's been the challenge, and one that we've been solving for, is kind of leading with an API first mindset.
I always tell people the technology you have to implement the most, if there's only one thing, is flexibility. And then they get upset with me because I didn't name a specific thing that they should go out and buy or put in. But it's to your point, it's the APIs, it's the cloud-based solutions, so that you can flex as your customers need you to, not what your corporate structure dictates, because they don't care about that when they're on the side of the road, or dealing with the death of a loved one, or what have you. Bijan, what about yourself? What are you seeing where there's been particularly strong adoption, and some areas where maybe there's some lagging or some difficulties that people are still working through?
I would say, as I look across the financial services landscape, there's a massive replatforming that's happening. And Dan touched upon this, in terms of the API centric mindset that his team has. Yes, there are several trends that are now coming together all at once. There's the migration to the cloud. There is breaking down silos of data so that you can get that 360-degree view of your customer. Then there is the digital engagement of that customer, right? All of those things are often well understood by organizations, but it's the bureaucracy, or it's the organizational structure, as Dan highlights, that limits how fast the organization can shift into these new modalities. And so, we talk to developers, right? We have over 10 million developers that are using Twilio APIs. And when we host a build-a-thon, as we like to call them in the enterprise space, with different organizations like insurance carriers, their developers totally get it, but they're often hamstrung by a variety of factors, right? It could be simply, hey, there's not enough budget, or it's going to happen next year, right? It is occurring, but again, the challenges are that there's so many changes all happening at the same time that it becomes a prioritization challenge, right? Do we focus on text messaging, or do we focus on migrating everything to the cloud, right? Ideally, you'd love to do everything all at once, right? But there's only a finite amount of money available. So I would say, I'm experiencing organizational inertia often, more so than desire to want to do certain things. I think the understanding is there. It's simply getting the projects through, whatever approval process needs to happen. But the amount of change we have seen in 2 years has been dramatic. Everything from, and I didn't touch upon this, but even drones, right? Like the usage of drones within the insurance industry has picked up dramatically. And we partake in that because we've got an IoT-based capability set. So we can embed using Twilio SIM into the drone that is being used to capture video of different properties, right? Maybe after a flood or a fire. So there's a lot of interesting innovation that's happening within the industry. I just feel that people are looking to take on more than perhaps the organizations are exactly ready for at any point in time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's one, actually, as an industry, we need to figure out how we act in this respect, because when March 2020 hit, suddenly all these things that were like, a couple years out for us to prioritize because we've got this backlog and then it'll take us 3 years till it's live or whatever, we had live in days. Think about work from home, where a number of companies had this on like their long-term horizon, but they just couldn't have the bandwidth for it. And then they didn't have a choice. And that's not the only thing they did. There are all these other things that they didn't have the bandwidth for, and yet they got it done. So I know it was Herculean, and we can't necessarily keep that pace up all the time. But maybe, Dan, back to your point about being more agile, looking for ways to cut down. That's just the way we work, and it's just going to take us that long. And when I always say, when you hear the word just, watch out for what's coming next, because it's oversimplifying something that we could have a better answer for. So maybe that's my contribution as a challenge to the industry, is let's look for ways to not just follow those same timelines and remember how capable we actually proved ourselves to be when our customers and our associates needed it. And it's hard and it's expensive, and yes to all that, and we can still find a better answer for it, perhaps. The questions are pouring in, so I'm going to be quiet and get back to the questions so I can ask some of you. Dan, I'm going to start with you on this one. And Yasmin, this is the one that you sort of preempted a little bit with your answer to the last question. Dan, you had mentioned all these different modalities, lots of different ways customers can engage. And of course, historically, we've always had lots of different ways people can engage: in person, telephone, mail, fax. I hate to say it, but whatever it was. But each engagement, you're sort of starting from scratch because it's a different person you're talking to in a different way, and they can't see the emails you sent to someone else or the texts or whatever. How are you managing a world where communication is much more fluid, and someone may be texting you while they're also on hold, trying to get through to someone on the in the call center or something, and exposing that information and allowing for a more seamless customer experience, so they're not giving the same story 4 times over, each time they have to talk to someone?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a meaty one. Let's see if I can boil it down here. So we do a variety of things. I think it goes back to the point around flexibility. Having a diverse ecosystem of modalities that your customers can choose from based on their preferences, and depending on kind of your strategic direction, how forthright you want to be with incentivizing utilization of like potentially cheaper cost channels versus not. Our approach has been to offer the degree of flexibility and really meet the customer in their channel of preference. But there's a variety of things we do to kind of preserve that interaction. A good example is with SMS and MMS. A lot of the text and pictures are automatically saved to our claims adjudication system. So they're immediately accessible to the adjusters for reference, either on the next conversation, whether or not it's over chat, over text, over the phone, or whatever modality it is, making sure that that's accessible to our employees as they need them to further that conversation. Other things we can do is if the virtual agent determines, or the customer determines, that the conversation needs to be escalated to a live person, we pass information along with that handoff as well, so that we can screen pop or provide information to the adjuster or to the representative. So before they pick up the phone, they know what the customer said, why they've reached out, what their intent is. It can just really jump in and help them self-serve. And then you can also use examples like that to pre-fill automation as well. So as a customer potentially goes down one path and maybe they're filing a claim and they abandon and they say, maybe I'll do this later, I'll call in tomorrow, whatever it is, whatever information you've captured. If they're, let's say, trying to do it through the app, you can use that to then pre-fill for the next iteration of their engagement when they reach out. So you can kind of accelerate that and afford them the opportunity to not repeat themselves. But I'd say for us, it's still a work in progress for building that event stream and that breadcrumb trail, so that when customers do switch between different channels, we're continually eventing and preserving that data and using it advantageously, so that we can lead proactively. And then that leads me to my final point, which would be we have a variety of proactive outbound notifications as well, that can provide information to our customers so they don't feel the need to reach out. So we have outbound text as a modality to do that, email, push notifications. to remind them about the status of their claim or a payment, things of that nature. So to provide them intuitively the information they need to prevent them from feeling the need to reach out altogether.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm thinking about those the predictions that you were talking about and trying to use that to tie things together and provide a more complete responsive customer experience without them having to start from scratch every time and educate someone to what their needs are. Yasmin, what about your perspective on this?
Brian, I would say the same thing, but first, did I hear you say facts?
I did, yeah. And it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it wasn't. I guess this 6 years has fast forwarded really fast. I'll say the
Used mine
same.
last week. I'll admit it.
That is funny. That is funny. I'll tell you, Brian, the honest truth is, I don't know any company that has this 100% figured out right now. It's a work in progress, I think, for all of us. And we're continuing to do the more digital items and making sure that our customers can connect with us the same way, whether they start a quote online and then they want to go to the intermediary or then go to the web. We're making sure that it's a seamless interaction all the way through. And in reference to proactive, texts and notifications to our customers, those are some things that we're continuing to do, especially for like catastrophes. Sending text out to those customers in particular areas to help them in reference to either avoidance or notifications and how can we help. And we're continuing to increase and bring those digital channels together for our customers, no matter where they want to reach us across the company. It's always work in progress, and we're always trying, because the ball and the puck is always moving. And so we're always moving with that puck to make sure that our customers are able to reach us how and when they want to, and then we are able to communicate with them in the manner in which they want us to communicate with them.
That's great. I thought you were going to go Wayne Gretzky and skate to where the puck is going, but I think we all did that in our head. Bijan, you enable a lot of different methods of communication and lots of different tools that a carrier may have multiple tools running on Twilio's infrastructure. Are you seeing them trying to put these things together? Are you able to assist with that? How are you thinking about making a more like omni-channel kind of customer experience?
So the great thing, Brian, is our tools are omni-channel out of the box, right? It's really up to the organization and their imagination to unleash the full breadth of those capabilities. So some organizations will just start with text messaging. Maybe then some will add a chatbot capability. Maybe others will say, for our marketing, we want to use one-to-many, so let's use our email API, right? The channels that tend to come later tend to be video, right? Because that's something that until the pandemic, people really honestly didn't think much about. But obviously, because of the distancing requirements, people are now looking at video. They're also looking at things like, okay, how are we managing the data of our customers? Because they're sitting in these multiple databases across the organization. So, I think it was Dan that talked about how different teams that were acting in a siloed fashion now need to work together. So for example, if you're going to send someone a payment reminder, don't you also want to send them a, hey, we received your payment, thank you very much, right? That means now that that data that was previously just part of accounts payable and accounts receivable needs to be sitting in a way that you can actually put a text message over to relate back to that customer that chooses to get a reminder via text. Others may want an email. And so that breadth of omni-channel desire is one that is slowly, sort of unleashing itself based on the organization's priorities. But the beauty is our tools are all interoperable. And it's just literally a question of the carrier's imagination and speed with which they want to leverage the capabilities.
So the capabilities there, still tough to do, but not a technical constraint on us anymore.
Correct.
It's sort of CRM mindset, right? Like you want to have a complete picture of that customer, and communication has always just been information, but not necessarily data. And it's using these digital tools to turn these conversations into data so that we can
Correct.
act on it and inform our decisions, how our employees, our associates engage with them, what kind of tools we put in their hands. Dan, sort of back to your point about, what are you seeding to your employees so that they can do a better job, create more confidence for the customer in that moment where they need some help. We have a ton of great questions. I'm going to put two of them together, see if I can knock out a couple of these all at once. We have questions on roadblocks and we have questions on compliance. And so I want to think about regulatory compliance. Is that something that's been difficult to navigate? Someone also mentioned in particular ADA compliance, so the Americans with Disabilities Act. How are we thinking about all the different forms of compliance we face, and where do these tools stand with it? And has that been a struggle in getting some of these tools deployed because it's new? And our compliance teams, the regulators we work with, may not have dealt with some of these things, or at least not in this context yet. Has that been a blocker at all? Dan, I'm gonna kick off with you since you went first last time, so you got in the longest break.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, that's a great question too. It's certainly something we've thought about. Even Liberty Mutual overall has rolled out training on accessibility for engineers, product owners, and everyone kind of in this that's involved with creating new capabilities to build awareness around how do we build capabilities that are broadly accessible to a diverse population of customers. And I think it goes back to the point around flexibility as well. Some customers can potentially only use one channel. And that's the channel that best works for them. And so that just further incentivizes us to create a broad array of capabilities that are accessible over a broad array of channels. But yeah, I think SMS is, I feel like I've referred back to SMS a handful of times now, but it's such a litigious, highly evolving landscape that we meet with our legal counsel on a regular basis to review use cases, and SMS also isn't end-to-end encrypted. So you need to make sure that the data you're providing and asking of your customers is data that's acceptable over a channel such as SMS. And that goes back to making sure that you educate your employees on all things digital and what is and is not a kind of an appropriate type of claim or question to self-serve over a particular channel. Or at least have the safeguards built in with that overall technology itself. So yeah, I'd say it really, I think, emphasizes the need for flexibility in many of our channel offerings to maintain compliance. And if I could go back to that example too with the predictive model, one thing that really excited me about that is, we have no shortage of kind of customer-facing chatbots, but if you think about and those are really retrieval-based closed domain chatbots in the sense that they would never reply back with a response that we haven't coded and like kind of trained that bot to reply back with. So there's not a lot of mystery to it. There's a lot of intelligence, quote unquote, with understanding natural language, mapping that to intent and fulfilling it. But as you advance into the world of like a generative chatbot, I would not feel comfortable putting a generative chatbot in front of a customer not knowing with full confidence how that bot will reply back to a broad array of customer questions. And that's what's exciting about onboarding employees into that experience, because particularly an asynchronous channel like text, it presents the opportunity for an employee to kind of validate the output of a generative chatbot and use that as reinforcement learning so that bot gets smarter and smarter with the help of your employees. And maybe ultimately you mature to a place where that bot can just be, it's 99.9% accurate. So it is something we can put in front of customers. But, having that partnership with your employees to build the confidence in a lot of self-service modalities, I think is also critical.
Confidence is coming up again. It's a critical thing. Yasmin, what about your take on this?
This is really ironic because I had a chance to sit in on an accessibility meeting just last week, and we were talking about this. And what I loved about this meeting is it was a collaboration of a number of different people from all across the organizations and different units. Now, when you say customer experience, that's one thing. When you say compliance, that's actually another thing. Because while we may be compliant, when you look at it from a customer's experience and all of the different accessibility needs and desires for customers, they're different. So from a compliancy perspective, we're good. But you look at an experience perspective, we're looking to improve and continue. We just don't want to be compliant. And I love just listening to the conversation and seeing the movement that we're making in that space. It's not just to be compliant. Compliant is here. We're looking to bring customer experience in with the different levels and needs of the customers. So that would be my conversation regarding compliance and customer experience. Just making sure that they're actually different. You know, compliance is one thing, customer experience is another.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Bijan, you're jumping.
Yeah, I was simply going to add, you know, one of the things we encounter a lot is the very conservative nature of insurance organizations, right? They are conservative by nature. Legal and compliance takes a much more conservative posture, which is totally understandable. And so even getting things like text messaging into certain organizations is a long process. It has certainly opened up, and now we're moving into things like, you know, chat bots and video, right? So it's you know, synchronous communications, right? And even with text messaging, getting a synchronous conversation or communication channel is difficult in the beginning, but we've been able to get there. I would say, you know, it really does come down to compliance, figuring out what is possible and what is not possible. And thereafter, to Jasmine's point, is not just saying, well, compliance signs off on it, but then figuring out, is it meeting the customer's needs, right? Are you know, getting that experience right over that particular channel, whichever digital channel that is? And you know, are you presenting it in a meaningful way to that customer so that customer now feels a level of trust and loyalty back to the carrier? Because, you know, we like to say at Twilio, you know, communications is about trust, and we are in the trust business. And so, you know, a lot of where we spend our time is figuring out elements to instill that trust so that you guys, from a carrier perspective, can deliver that to your customer.
We're talking all values today. It's trust, confidence, flexibility. We have a few minutes left. I think we have to hit a hot buzzword, or this wouldn't be a good webinar. So we're going to talk about the metaverse. There's a question that came in on that. The question is, what's your take on customer experience and digital in the metaverse? But I'll broaden it out. Is the metaverse a conversation point? Are you envisioning your associates wearing AR headsets or a VR, I guess, or anything? How are you thinking about the metaverse, or are you at all? Dan, we'll start with you.
Oh boy. I would say it is, candidly, it is not top of mind for me at the moment, although it might be for some of my peers. I think there is a future for AR, VR within P&C, certainly, both through the employee lens and also for our customers. I mean, for employees, how cool it would be right now if we all just put on headsets and I was sitting around a table with Bijan and Yasmin and you, Brian, and, you know, whatever avatars we selected. But that beyond that, I think it's a great way to build a community in a remote world, and feel connected in a remote world. I think it helps bridge that gap from an employee perspective. From a P&C perspective, I might shoot from the hip here, but there's no shortage of examples in my mind where AR, VR could be applicable, particularly through the lens of claims adjudication. Right? If there's a catastrophe, something like that, can you have a system where if the current environment is unsafe, you can still have an AR, VR modality that's going through, potentially driving through that disaster zone, and you're able to experience what our policyholders have lost, and potentially file a claim in advance of them even knowing, whether or not their home is a total loss or the severity of the issue, or just inspecting a home, right? Like we have field adjusters that they travel around and they go to people's houses and they'll inspect damage, by way of example. Can you empower the policyholder to actually do that? They open up their phone and they walk around with their phone, and it's taking measurements as it goes. Couple that with machine vision, looking for mold, thermal imaging to see where there could be damage on the roof from a drone that's flying over, potentially based on hail. There's a lot of really exciting, innovative ways I think that AR, VR can be brought into the way that we operate within PNC. Do I think it's in the immediate future? No, but do I think it's in the next decade? Yes.
We are talking about the customer of tomorrow, so that's okay. Tomorrow can be 10 years out. Having run a claims organization, I think you're absolutely right, is especially in claims and in training too. You don't have massive losses that you can just take a new class of adjusters into. You have to simulate it somehow. And, worked with a few TPAs out there who have some pretty rich VR based training solutions that they've had for a few years. Facebook was still called Facebook when they were started doing this. But Yasmin, how is Nationwide thinking about the metaverse, and is it a conversation yet?
I would say the same thing as Dan. I don't see that as a number one or number two priority right now, but to say that we will be doing this from looking at it from 5, 10, 15 years, yes, I think we have to. And not only just from a claims perspective, and I have that 20-year claims experience as well, but not from a claims experience. And also, let's look at the sales experience. When you look at it from a selling of a policy, I think we can use it across the board from an insurance perspective.
Yeah.
And I would say we have to think about it from every aspect of the business that we're in, and including from the associate side. Just imagine sitting in a room and you're seeing everyone in the room at the same time, and not just on Teams or on Zoom, but you actually can see. So I think it's something that we have to have those conversations. It's something that we are not shy about having those conversations. But is it a first or second priority right now? The answer is no. But to Dan's point, it is on the horizon.
We also had a question on the use of Slack and Teams and Zoom and things like that for our associates. So I'm going to count that as another question we got to. So thank you for that. But that's to your point. We're using other things today.
Yes.
They're better than nothing, but wouldn't it be nice if we could take that a step further? But I take it it's not a pressing issue today for Nationwide, but it's on the horizon as something to stay open to.
Correct.
Bijan, you're going to have the final word on this. Where are we with the metaverse? You're on mute, so you don't get the final. There you go.
I would say that, we're definitely doing a lot in Web 3.0 as a company in terms of supporting customers that are focused on Web 3.0. I would sort of agree with kind of Dan and Jasmine's sort of view on prioritization. I think it's going to hit things like retail. It's going to hit things like hospitality. It's going to hit industries that are more e-commerce centric, right? And we're working with a lot of those organizations right now as they think through kind of the next 5 years of prioritization. But again, I can certainly see the value that brings to the ecosystem of insurance carriers. And I'm sure it's a topic that we'll be talking about more in the near future.
So it'll be the webinar of the future that we get into, or tomorrow's webinar. Bijan, Yasmin, Dan, thank you all very much for joining us. Great conversation. Excellent questions from the audience as well. We had some really good ones. Tried to answer as many as we could and jam some together. So hopefully if you asked one of those questions, you're feeling satisfied. And if you didn't, hopefully the answers were still really valuable and interesting. It was a great conversation. Thank you to our 3 panelists and to all of you and to Reuters for putting this together. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.